There is a kind of weakness that doesn't scream. It doesn't show up in dramatic crises or grand collapses. It hides in your habits, in your wasted days, in your "I'll do it later." And it's destroying you without you realizing it. The samurai had a name for this: the treacherous void, an inner space where nothing happens. And precisely because nothing happens, everything gets worse. And if you keep watching, you'll understand why this void is the real reason you can't get anything done, and how a single ancestral method can flip that switch even today. Because discipline isn't strength. Discipline is identity, and you're about to discover that. You wake up inspired, but by the afternoon, you've already lost control. You promise you'll change, but the next day you feel ashamed of what you didn't do. You create goals, lists, plans, and you end up repeating everything all over again. It feels like there's an invisible force pulling you down, a kind of silent paralysis, a cycle you know all too well. You try, you fail, you feel bad, you try again, you fail again. And the worst part, each failure eats away at the way you see yourself. It's as if, little by little, you start believing that this is just how I am, that you weren't born disciplined, that there's no point. But the truth is simple: you're not broken. You're just trapped in a psychological pattern the samurai identified centuries ago. Over 700 years ago, Japanese warriors trained using a method that is almost unknown today. They believed that before winning external battles, a man had to win an even more brutal one: the battle against his own undisciplined mind. And there was a ritual, simple but brutal, that they used to turn ordinary men into unshakable forces. It's this ritual that reveals why you still can't get anything done, and why everything changes once you understand how it works. Ryo was a young apprentice. Talent, he had it. Willpower, he thought he did. But every morning the master found him standing still, hesitant, staring at the ground. Ryo always said, "Today, I really start." But he never started. He tried and quit, promised and broke his own promise, felt ashamed but didn't change. Until one day the master called him and said, "You don't fail because you lack discipline. You fail because you still believe you're the kind of man who fails." Ryo didn't understand, so the master continued, "When you discover the samurai method, your mind will never be the same again. You don't change because you try to use willpower. But discipline doesn't come from force. Discipline comes from the identity you believe you have. You act according to who you believe you are. A samurai doesn't discipline himself to act. He acts because he believes he is the kind of man who acts. The difference is brutal. The first pillar of the samurai method is called Kensho no Mi, the Eye of Awakening. It says, a man must see himself before trying to change the world. This means identifying the invisible pattern that sabotages you. And the pattern is simple. You see yourself as someone who tries, and those who try, fail. The samurai removes the verb try from the mind. He only executes. This is the first foundation. You act according to who you believe you are. The second pillar is called shikai, the four enemies of the mind. They are 1. Doubt, 2. Fear, 3. Agitation, 4. Procrastination. These four enemies form an internal cycle that paralyzes you. But what the samurai did was different. They didn't try to eliminate these enemies. They ritualized action before the mind had time to sabotage. They moved the body before the thought could interfere. This is the real mechanism of the method. Action precedes emotion. Movement precedes motivation. The gesture precedes the desire. This is why you still don't do anything. You wait to feel something before acting, and that will never happen. The third pillar of the samurai method is brutally simple, yet it changes everything. Discipline is a neural circuit, not a talent, not a gift, not a mystical force. When you procrastinate, it's not laziness. It's just a neural pathway reinforced by repetition, an old, familiar track your mind walks because it's the most known. It's the root of survival, not evolution. Centuries before modern neuroscience, the samurai understood this intuitively. They called this process keiko, the training that shapes the spirit. It wasn't just physical practice. It was practice that sculpted character, molded inner posture, and redefined identity. Modern science confirms what they lived. When you repeat an action for just 2 or 3 minutes, your brain releases anticipatory dopamine, a burst of energy that doesn't come at the end, but at the beginning. This reveals a harsh truth. You try to feel motivated before acting, but the brain only releases motivation after you act. The samurai discovered this long before labs, microscopes, or scanners existed. They knew discipline wasn't an emotional state. It was a neurochemical trigger. Starting produces dopamine. Dopamine creates continuity. Continuity builds character. That is the third pillar. Discipline is not something you feel, it's something you trigger. And whoever masters this, masters themselves. Ryo heard all of this from the master. He listened with respect, with focus, with the silent hope of someone desperate to change. Yet he fell into the same trap that destroys any man trying to transform. During a decisive training session, he hesitated. He overthought. He sought safety where action was required. He doubted his own movement and failed. He felt like an imposter. He believed he wasn't worthy of the path. He convinced himself his failure was permanent, not temporary. The weight of shame pressed on his chest, and he said, "I'm not like you. I always get stuck." The master approached him slowly, without judgment. He looked Ryo in the eyes and said firmly, "You fell because you tried to act as who you think you are, not as who you need to become." The words cut through Ryo like a silent blade. In that moment, he realized something profound. The battle wasn't against the training, the technique, or the difficulty. The real battle was inside him. He wasn't fighting failure. He was fighting his old identity, the weak, tired, fearful version of himself, the one he had fed for years. And this is the fall we all face. Before every breakthrough, there is a collapse. Before every transformation, the mind begs to go back to who you used to be. The next day, without waiting for motivation, without waiting for confidence, Ryo simply acted. A small gesture, simple, almost insignificant, but decisive. It was the first time he understood the method for real. He didn't need to feel ready. He didn't need to feel strong. He didn't need to feel brave. He only needed to trigger the first movement. At the end of training, the master said, "Today you were born, not the man you were, but the man you decided to be." Ryo didn't just perform a gesture. He was reborn because of it. And that's exactly what you must do today. Be born through the gesture, not through emotion. But the method doesn't end there. There is a fourth element, rarely spoken of, yet it completes the path. The samurai called it Fudoshin, the immovable mind. Fudoshin is emotional armor. It doesn't mean ignoring feelings. It means not letting them command movement. It is the ability to act even when your inner world is in chaos. It's the state where action becomes ritual, where consistency becomes identity, where an ordinary man becomes someone who doesn't waver. How to apply this today? Block distractions before starting. Shrink your goals until they seem ridiculously small. Act for 2 minutes without negotiating with your mind. Let motivation come after. Treat the first gesture as sacred. Turn repetition into inner posture. This principle is so powerful that, on its own, it destroys chronic procrastination and creates a state of presence few people ever achieve. Now, I need to ask you the same question the master asked Ryo at the turning point. Who are you training to become? Because every day, you train something, even in silence, even without noticing. If you hesitate, you trained hesitation. If you delay, you train delay. If you run, you trained escape. The question is simple, yet it destroys every excuse. What are you training today? Your answer reveals who you will be tomorrow. The samurai method isn't about productivity. It's about identity. It's not about waking up motivated. It's about awakening who you are and who you choose to become from this moment on. If you apply only one thing from this message, let it be this. Act before you feel. Feel after you act. Repeat until your brain understands you are someone new. Your future doesn't begin at the result. It begins at the first gesture, and that gesture can happen now. And when your discipline begins to scare people, that's when you'll know you finally became who you needed to be.